the world during his time. But it was in 1953 that he became associated with the Outward Bound Trust, something that had a strong personal connection for him with its founder. And Prince Philip remained a member of the charity as a patron on its board until just 2 years ago. Let's speak now to the Chief Executive of the Outward Bound Trust, Nick Barrett. Nick, thank you very much for being with us on BBC News this afternoon. Just before we talk a bit more about his involvement with the work of Outward Bound, it's worth saying that your founder and he is a name that people who've been listening to the coverage about the Duke will be a name they realise they've heard, and they might be surprised about his connection with the Outward Bound.
The Kurt Hahn's connection you're talking.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, Kurt Hahn was a German refugee who arrived in this country before the war. But above all, he was an educationalist and with a particular philosophy around education. And he had a profound influence on Prince Philip, I believe, when Prince Philip was younger. Yeah,
and he'd been his headmaster at the school in Germany from which he'd left, and then obviously he found Gordonston. What was apart from that personal connection, what do you think made the Prince enthusiastic about being part of Outward Bound? Because it was a charity he chose to stay with for so long.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, we've all come to learn in the last 24 hours what an extraordinary, varied and busy life he had. And yet there was, if you're looking for a clear thread throughout all of that, was his absolute passion and commitment for the development of young people. And, and that's evidenced by his lifelong involvement with the Outward Bound Trust and, of course, with his founding of the Duke of Edinburgh's award scheme. But both of those speak to this cause that he passionately believed in, which was that every young person should be given the opportunity to develop themselves and find out the best in themselves.
I mean, in an increasingly urbanised country, one thinks of his commitment to Outward Bound, one thinks of his involvement with the National Playing Fields Association. You mentioned also his founding and lifelong involvement with the Duke of Edinburgh award scheme. As you described it as a thread running through his life. I mean, it seems to have been a real passion for him. Was that expressed in his contributions as a patron?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he stayed close to us for decades. And, he would drop in sometimes to our centres to meet our staff and talk to young people without any publicity at all. And then he'd also help us with some high-profile events, particularly around fundraising, helping us to raise literally millions of pounds to enable young people from any kind of background, financially disadvantaged or whatever, to come on Outward Bound courses. And a lot of this was sight unseen. It was just because he wanted us, the charity, to thrive and do well.
Was he good at that task of sort of extracting money from potential sponsors and supporters?
He was awesomely good, and like everything about him, it was simple and to the point. And he would never pretend otherwise if he was meeting a potential wealthy donor they might need their money. I mean, he used to say regularly that a good business makes money, but a good charity needs money, and that would be the mantra that he'd hook them on.
Nick Barrett, Chief Executive of the Outward Bound Trust. Thank you.